Welcome everyone. This is Mohammad Amir. Do you guys hear my voice? Yes, sir.
Yes, Amr, I can hear you.
All right, thank you. So welcome everyone on our webinar on Cardiology Fellowship Interactive session. Uh, Thank you for joining us tonight. With us, we have very renowned cardiologist, Dr. Alam, who is Associate Program Director, Cardiology Fellowship at Baylor College of Medicine. He is also interventional cardiologist. He's a very kind of like kind person who gives us like precious time in this time of the day, while he is also on stemming call. So thank you so much, Dr. Alam, for joining us today. With us also we have our second panelist, who is Dr. Yasser. He is currently he joined as PGY4 cardiology fellow at West Virginia University. So also he is a very good and like very well-renowned researcher. So thank you, Yasser, for joining us today too.
You're welcome. Thank you so much, Amr, for introduction. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. I hope all of you can hear me. And I will also like to thank Dr. Alam, who joined us on like STEMI call. And sorry for the time change at the last minute, because Dr. Alam was busy in the hospital, and so we had to change the time. So
Sure.
let me see if Dr. Alam is here. Just send him a text.
I think he just texted in the group. So
okay, give me 1 second, guys. All right. So all right. So Amr, how about you can start?
Yeah,
so today our plan is like, guys, we're gonna go over like how you're gonna work on your CV, and PS, and what are the do's and don'ts, and also.
Oh my God! Him like he's so, going off on the. I'm like, who's bomb?
Guys, please mute.
Yes, I'm gonna unmute you just a second. Okay, yes, sir. Okay.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. So basically today's plan is like, we're gonna go over like, what are the critical mistakes you should avoid in your CV and also in your personal statement. I know it's kind of like a last minute thing for you to do as you're applying in like 2 days. But we tried our best to make up some time as I just started my fellowship, and given busy schedule of Dr. Alam also. Also, if you have any questions, we're gonna have Q&A session at the end. So feel free to ask like any question about how the programs review their CVs, or how what kind of like interview questions they ask, or any visa related questions or ranking questions or things like that. So we will hope to make it as informative as possible. All right, so initially we're gonna go over some general ERA CV stuff. That's also like helpful, I think, so that you don't have any mistakes in your CV and personal statements. All right, Amir, I'll give mic to you so you can go over.
Yeah, so like that, Yasser said, so the first thing first, importance of like CV versus personal statement, proofread, and accurate information. So these are the three critical things that I think all the programs must like, they do take these things into notice. So I will leave this part of CV versus personal statement to Yasser and Dr. Alam, like how to think that is that CV takes more weightage versus personal statement while this program selects the candidate for the interview.
All right. So guys, I'll give a few tips because I recently went through the whole process. So basically, I'll say like CV. Both of these things matter, CV and a personal statement. Your personal statement, obviously, as you're applying for cardiology, which is one of the most competitive field in internal medicine. So you really want to make. you really want to make sure like you don't have any critical mistakes in your personal statement and CV. So first, let's talk about the CV. Amar, you can go to the next slide. All right, guys. So in the ERA CV, you have your general things here: work authorization, your visa status, and city or state you're living in. Now, one thing important, as I've been mentoring students, which I've noticed, like sometimes students, they're married to somebody like a U.S. citizen or someone, and they're expecting that they're going to get a green card in the next 4 months. And what happens is like there have been instances where
that day he thought about.
All right, we will appreciate if everybody mute themselves so that it will be smooth seminar. Basically, don't mention as a green card if you don't have actual green card, not a physical green card yet in your CV, even if you're expecting it, because what happens is sometimes the process gets delayed, and once you get matched or something, it might be an issue. So Amir, you can go to the next thing. Just go over like all the personal information pages. All right, next you have the NRMP ID. Now, sometimes the ID is the same as that of the USMLE residency ID, like when you apply for the residency. So, but you have to double check, make sure it's already in the system. Because I've seen instances where people have not even put in their NRMP ID, and then they go unmatched because programs were unable to like rank them. Or sometimes you will get an email or phone call from a coordinator that, hey, you don't have an ID in your ERA system. So ACLS, BLS, I think for all the residents, it's pretty like mandatory. You do that like every 2 years. So by the time you just started your second year, you're gonna have ACLS and BLS renewed. So it's better to get it renewed before you apply for fellowship. And Alpha Omega status, unless you do like some master degree during your residency, you're gonna have that status if you do well on your master's with a good GPA. But otherwise, most of the IMGs don't have that. So next is basically your ethnicity. So it's pretty straightforward. All right, next we have the higher education and a medical education, right? So higher education, like this is mainly for US education if you have a bachelor degree here or any like master degree here. So you're gonna add that. And then medical education, obviously your medical school. And then additional information like it's good thing to add, like if you're a member of professional societies like ACC, European Society of Cardiology, ESC, AHA, SCAI, SCAI, or like any other cardiology society, feel free to add it here. So, medical school award.
Yeah, pardon? So yes, sir, I got one question on the same thing, that like people don't have like a full membership to all these societies. So can they write it just like based on this, they have login access to that, or just because they need a full membership, so, like they have to pay for the?
That's a very good question. Basically what happens is like whenever you present a poster in any of these meetings, you automatically become a member, because in that meeting you can present for free. There are a few meetings where you have to register, but if you're a poster presenter, mostly like pretty much most of the meetings are free, so you can still add it. Okay. And also you can get a letter from your program director that, hey, you want to be a member of this society, like ACC accept letter from your program director during internal medicine, and then that's how you become the member for free. I think they don't charge you anything. So medical school awards, here's like pretty straightforward. You're going to mention whatever awards you get during your medical school. Next section is basically your training, right? So where you did your residency. So it's pretty straightforward. You're going to mention starting date and an end date, or if you're still a resident, you will not going to mention an end date. All right, so let me just double check. Dr. Alam is here. Okay, Dr. Alam is here. We would like to introduce him. Amir, can you unmute?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Alam, for joining us today. And as all of you guys know, Dr. Alam is an interventional cardiologist and also associate program director at Baylor College of Medicine. So thank you so much, Dr. Alam, for joining us in your post-timing call.
No, definitely, it's a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, and look forward to this presentation and hopefully have a fruitful discussion today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Just to recap, we actually went over basic demographic profile and basic like residential and ethnicity basic profile. Now we're going to discuss about the experience. So in experience, so you're going to mention everything which you did before your residency, which will be auto-populated from your residency EROS CV to your new CV basically. And in the EROS, there's a section of history where you can see any previous EROS CV. Even if you go unmatched like few times, you're going to see all the history over there. So so make sure like things are consistent, dates are consistent in all of your CVs, because someone can easily backtrack and check that. So other questions, mostly I get a lot of questions about like whether to write descriptive form and the bullet forms of experience. So I will leave that for Dr. Alam. Dr. Alam, what do you recommend, like which form of description is better?
I mean, when I look at the application, to me, bullets are more high yield because it's faster for me to read. Descriptive, if it is something that you cannot put in bullets, for sure, then you do some descriptive, but try to keep it very concise. So if I'm reading at it, in one or two sentences, I know what you did on that work experience, for example. So bullets work most of the time better than the description.
Thank you so much. And the other day we were with another program director from University of Illinois, Carl Foundation. Basically, don't write "I worked as," like I did this in your description, and also make sure there's no redundancy. Like don't mention your supervisor name like 3-4 times or something. That also doesn't look good. Keep it like short and sweet, like 2-3 bullet points, and maybe like a one starting line. And if you did observership, don't write like you actually examined the patient, because that can also be an issue if you get your visa renewed or something, because sometimes like if that's more kind of like people who are applying for residency, but in your case, like you're already like observing the patient and examining them. So it doesn't matter in your case. All right, Amir, we'll move to next. So, so in terms of experience, I will also like to add, Dr. Alam, do you recommend adding a residency experience and make that experience will be like, okay, we worked in a nice CCU, we did like consult services in the cardiology. What do you recommend for that?
So when you are putting that in as a work experience, I think that is assumed if you put in your residency that you did all of that. In your residency, you can include that. If you want to add it as a separate work experience or clinical experience, I think it becomes redundant. I'm not sure. I've not filled this application in a while. I know you guys have done it more recently, but I would think that if you're putting in your residency and then just do that separately as work experience, it becomes redundant.
Yes, I agree with that. I think there should not be any redundancy in your CV, because if you're resident, basically that's presumed you're doing all of these things. But make sure if you're in the wellness committee, you're doing any volunteer during your residency. So feel free to add that as your volunteer experience.
For example, if you're part of the QI committee, or if you're a part of,
Exactly.
let's say, curriculum committee, or you're working with your residency program and coming up with morbidity and mortality conferences, that is addition to what you've done doing as a resident. I think that will count, and you should highlight that somewhere. Yeah.
Exactly. I think that's a very important point. Any extra committee you join, like a CIR even, wellness committee or research committee, or if you are PI on any project, mention that as a separate experience in your CV. So next section, we're gonna go over like how to add the publications. So in ERAS, we have like peer-reviewed journals and articles and abstracts. So all the abstracts and articles we're gonna go here. And other than published, we're gonna have submitted status, provisionally accepted status. Like if you receive minor comments on your article, so that will be provisionally accepted. If you have like, then you can have production or in press status. That means your article accepted and it's in press right now. So other than that, Amr, can you go to the previous slide? One more. One more also. So basically, oh yeah, sorry, the next one. So basically, other status, you have scientific monograph, which is like if you worked on any issue of the journal, like a book chapter, like single book chapter where multiple authors have worked. So that can be scientific monograph also. And also there's section for peer-reviewed book chapters, which you're gonna mention. So here I would like to show you from my CV, like content is very important, like the way you organize the things. I would like to highlight this. So you can mention like last name and then comma and then the first initial and then period and a comma. That's how you're gonna add all the authors. And then you basically put the title of the article and then the journal name. Now you can use an NLM catalog or title for your journal name, and then publication status will be published. You're gonna have date and you're gonna have issue and volume. So now for abstracts, whatever meeting the abstract got published, it will be published in the supplementary section of the journal. So for full articles, make sure you mention a PubMed ID, because I was talking to a few program directors. They mentioned like when programs filter applications, they have the filter for PubMed ID. Dr. Alam, what's your point on that?
So any research that is done contributes. I agree. In ERAS itself, there is not a way for you to distinguish whether this is an abstract or a full publication when you're submitting it as in the application. So it's not on your end, but when we look at it, then we just go over, and it's easy to tell by looking at the PubMed ID or by looking at, whether it's like 1 page or 2 pages and it's a supplement. So it can be filtered and it program specific. Some programs will look at it. Most of the programs will go over the entire publication that you have there to get an idea about your work.
Nice. Thank you so much, Dr. Alam. So basically, that's how you're going to see the abstracts. If something is like S means is a supplemental section. So, and also it will be supplemental issue of the journal. And these are supplemental pages. So whatever abstracts you're going to publish in whatever meetings, it will be published in their main journal. For example, Sky publishes their abstracts in a CCI, and you're going to put their supplemental pages and supplemental issue also. And then now, Dr. Alam, one question that have been asked multiple times. Now, most of the time, residents, they have a project, they first send abstract to the national meeting, and then that abstract, they publish a full paper, then they do oral presentation on that. So should we mention in each different section again and again?
So the abstracts that are already published as a full paper, then you should mention the final publication. Now, if you did like an oral presentation, and there's a separate section where you can mention those, you should mention the titles of those, but you don't have to do the full citation again and again. Like for example, if you have, if you presented at AHA, then you can mention that it was presented at AHA and you can put the reference. But I think that's okay, because they want you to mention that if you present it somewhere, and it's good if you presented the paper and then later on it was published, it's a good continuation of your effort. So I think that's good. That's fine.
Just to recap, so basically you suggest like we don't mention the abstract, but we do mention the full publication, but we do mention the oral poster and oral presentation.
Right.
Okay.
Because if
That
you,
makes
like,
sense.
for example, if you say on the top that it's published in Sky Journal, let's say CCI, and on the bottom you mention the same abstract and say circulation, it's confusing. And then whoever's looking at it, they'll be like, why is he mentioning the same twice? What matters at the end would be the final publication and then your presentation in the presentation section.
Exactly. Thank you so much. So basically, I would like to ask you another question here. Most time applicants have asked me like, does a lot of abstracts help in the CV, or should be half and half? Like abstract, if we have 50% abstract, there should be 50% publication. Because sometimes like programs take it as a negative that, okay, this guy is just publish abstracts rather than finishing the whole project, and that kind of like goes negative towards your application.
So it really depends on how much you have to put in there. For example, if in the past 2 years you've been working hard and you have 50 abstracts, of those 10 have been published as papers, that's fine, you put all of them. But if you show that over the past 8 years you have 50 abstracts and only one published paper, then it may go a little bit negative in your favor, because then people will say, well, maybe he does not tend to finish the project that he's taken over and leaves it after the presentation. So yes, but if having any abstract or publication on your CV is better than having none. So if you have any abstracts you like to put there, but try to highlight your publications above them so people see those, that you've done those, and it should be good.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry to ask a lot of questions. These are the
No.
questions which we have came across. So another question I would like to add, like sometimes students publish like in non-PubMed journal, and they're like, is it helpful? And how much research is focused for the cardiology? Like I know like everyone is publishing nowadays. What's the average number of programs takes? Like somewhat with the 15 papers is like a stellar applicant with 100 papers.
So no, I think the absolute number honestly does not matter. When we look at the application, we can tell that this person is genuinely publishing because he likes to do that and he's interested in research. And then we have applicants where we can tell, this person was interested in GI 3 years ago, but then he changed his track 2 years ago and he's been consistently working in cardiology. That's okay. Then you mention what you did for GI and you have some work from that. And then you mention all the work more recent that you've done in cardiology, for example. That's totally fine. Definitely, if there are 100 papers someone published and 50 of them are his first author papers, and then he's transitioning towards being senior author, that is a good trend. If you have 5 papers and you're like mostly in the middle, like 4th or 5th author in all of them, then that is not the same impact as having 2 or 3 papers as first author paper. So it's very important that you should be either primary or co-author as a first or to be at the senior or the top 3 that you've done. Because when we look at it, most of the times the first 3 authors and the last author are the most important. Usually that's how we look at it. And if you have made a significant contribution to a paper and in your residency or wherever team you're working with, you should demand or you should ask for being in the top 3, depending on how much work you put in. If you've done a lot of work and you're still not there, then you need to be more assertive there.
Thank you so much. So let's suppose someone have a 50 papers. How much on average should be a first author papers? Because that was another question from applicants, like a lot of times.
It will depend on what stage in career you are. For example, if there is someone who has been doing research for a while, and they've done, let's say, PhD, or they have done a master's in public health, and during that 2-3 years they published 40-50 papers, then you should start seeing them transitioning from being first author to being senior author in their field of expertise. If you have 50 papers and you're still, let's say you're a resident and you've done research with other people and you're still first author in even 10 of those, it's good. because that tells us you started and you're contributing with other, because it's natural. You'll be collaborating with the team. And when you're collaborating with the team, then your authorship will change in every paper depending on how much work you put in, and it's totally fine. So you should have, if you, depending on how many papers you have, the fewer the paper are, the more important it is to be in the top 3 authors. The more the papers are, then 10, 20, 30% first author is more than enough usually. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And during the interviews, I will go a little bit off topic. During the interviews, like, does program expect to know each paper in and out? What's the general trend?
So this will depend on who is interviewing that day and what's their field of interest, honestly. So you should know about your papers that you're putting in your CV, if you've done any significant amount of work on those, because you never know. For example, if I'm interviewing Yasser, I'll ask him about meta-analysis. And if I'm interviewing Amir, I'm like, okay, so tell me about this work. And if there is someone who's working on heart failure, then I'm less likely as an interventionalist interviewing him to ask too much about it, unless it's something that's really related to what I do, or is related to my research interest or the research method I may be interested in. For example, if someone, we interviewed one candidate last time who was involved in a network meta-analysis, and that's a field of interest for me. So I asked him more about that, like, tell me what you did, how did you do it? So be ready, because you never know. And the only way to know that, like, which publications might potentially be asked of you, if you have a lot more, is to look at your itinerary the day or two before. When you get it, at least you know who's going to be interviewing you. Do a quick PubMed search, and you'll know what their interest is, and if there is something that is going to be matching with their interest.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Exactly. That's what I used to do for, if I have an interview with a heart failure, then if they ask me, like, tell me about any interesting case during your residency, then I'll tell them any interesting case report on the heart failure that I eventually published. So this kind of like strengthened my interesting case and make it more authentic, that that case was not just interesting, but it was so interesting, like, that I even published a paper on that.
Right.
So that is something which you can do for your interesting case during your interviews.
Yeah.
All right, Amir, I'll leave my share screen and give the screen back to you. All right, we can go to next slides. So personal statements here, I would like to add a few points. Now, personal statement from a residency to the fellowship, it's a little bit different by the time when you apply for residency, because now you're already a doctor and you're a practicing physician. Now you want to take one step forward and you want to go to a subspecialty. Now, Dr. Alim, I would like to ask this to you. Do you think that making a story that, oh, my father had a heart attack, got a PCI, and that kind of like run the show and like that made me interested? What do you think, like adding a story versus no story in the personal statement?
So if you truly have an event that triggered you to pursue a passion, then that's fine. People like to know that. If there is a passion that drove you to where you are, and this was driven by one or two incidences that personally affected you, no problem with that. But a lot of time, if you just come up with some story which you are not so passionate about, I don't think that adds a lot of value. It's easy to filter when you're talking to someone, like how passionate they were about that particular event. A lot of the events could be generic too. So just remember, these personal statements, we have so many of them come through every year. There's certain things that you can tell, right? Well, this is pretty generic. So if it is something very specific to you, and you felt it really made a difference for you, that you pursued, let's say, interventional cardiology, general cardiology, then it's fine to mention it. Yeah. But I would not make a really big deal out of it. You want to also put in your personal statement other things that you've done that provoked your interest during your residency, for example.
And
thank you so much.
Yeah, on the same line, like how do you think, like how many paragraphs should describe the interest and the experience in cardiology in this fellowship personal statement?
So the personal statement should never be more than 1 page, as we all know. And the reason is when you're screening applications, um, there's not much time to read a personal statement. And if you, I've seen some candidates reduce the font size to put more in on 1 page. That does not help. 3 paragraphs is more than enough. But try to keep it as a statement which is quick to read, and it flows, and you are able to get everything about you that you want to highlight. There's so many things in your CV. If you want to pick, let's say, 2 or 3 things from your CV that you want to highlight about yourself, you can put them in your personal statement. Then when I'm reading it, then I will go back to your CV and maybe I'll look at it more and I say, yeah, I missed that part in the CV when I was looking at it. Maybe you've done some volunteer work at, let's say, an NGO somewhere, and that was there, but we didn't look at it, and it was important. And you can mention that briefly, and it sticks to the person who's reading it, your personal statement especially. So 2 or 3 paragraphs, I think personally, is more than enough.
Yeah, thank you so much. Basically, I would like to explain this also. The way I wrote it in my time, basically, the first paragraph, I just wrote like an interesting story in a very concise way, and that how I got interested to the cardiology, and then basically what I have learned during my residency, what are the skills I got during my residency, and through what experiences in a very summarized, compact way, and then how I developed more interest in cardiology, or what skills I've got for cardiology during my residency, and how I was inclined to research, and what clinical practice have changed from my research, like in my daily clinical practice. And then also I added like a 1 paragraph about COVID, like how I was able to multitask, doing like a busy shifts and doing like a publication side by side, having like a family and a newborn back in April. So that kind of like tells the program that, okay, this guy is multitasking, and you need to have all these qualities, I think. And then last paragraph, basically why I'm a good fit for cardiology, why I'm good fit for the program, and where I'm seeing myself in next 5 to 10 years.
You have to think like a salesman, because
Yes.
you're trying to bring out the best of you, and you don't have to be shy or humble. At the same time, don't go overboard, but put everything that you think your strengths are. And it's important what Yasser said, that why would you be a good candidate for any program that you're applying to? Some people actually make personalized statements for few programs that they really are interested in, and that's okay as well. But it takes a lot of time, and it is appreciated when someone reads a personal statement and you're like, okay, this looks like they really made an effort and put this for our program. For them.
Yes, and also I would like to add here, in Airbus, you can write multiple person statements and you can assign separately to the programs. So we'll move to the next slide. So never say bad about your parent health. I'll say like story, if you have a story, have an interesting story. Don't just make up any story that, okay, someone had like a sudden cardiac arrest outside my door, and I kind of like rushed away and I did a CPR and I saved the patient. So be realistic, like how many sudden cardiac arrests you're going to save in the hospital? Not a lot. So be very realistic. If you make this story like, oh, I was in an airplane and someone had a heart attack, I saved the patient, just be realistic in the stories. Never mention any patient identity. Yes, I will agree. Like don't mention any patient identity, like Mr. John or Mr. Smith was presented with this. So don't do that. Never pose yourself as a superhero. I mean, yeah, so you have to be somewhat in the middle, show the good side of yourself also, but also, Dr. Alam, I would like to ask this to you, like, do you think mentioning a weakness and how a candidate improved that weakness during his residency. Do you think this is something good to add on in a personal statement?
So if you had a weakness when you started, for example, remember that even with that weakness, you were matched into residency. And if you can show that over the past year or 2 years, you've worked on it, and now you've turned it and flipped it into your strength one way or the other, that's good to mention. I don't see any problem with that.
I do have some applicants which have kind of like a low scores on USMLE, and unfortunately during residency, because of some things, they failed a step 3, and now they're like, should we apply for cardiology? And if yes, how's your personal statement will be? So what do you recommend for them?
So in that case, in your personal statement, you have to explain if you had, let's say, a mishap in the family, or health wise you had problem around the time, or something happened that you could not put your full effort into your steps, or let's say when the education, the way you had it was not the same way as was geared in the exam or tested in the exam, for example, you can mention that, and then you can show how you improved on that. I think that's all, because if you have low scores, you then, when the application is reviewed by the committee, everyone looks at that. And then if you have put a reason why it was the way it was, then it's fine. Then you explain it, because there's no other way to explain it except for your personal statement. And if you do explain it well, then you may actually have a good chance of getting an interview. Versus not explaining or trying to avoid it, then you may not be selected sometimes. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Now, one more question I would like to ask. Now, do you think that programs also care about the scores when it comes to the cardiology fellowship? Do they use filters?
Yes, we still do. Most
Okay.
of the programs still, actually all the programs still have, and the reason is this. For example, in our program, we had last year 800 plus applications for 6 spots. Now we have to screen, and there are like 4 or 5 people who screen these applications. So some may put a score cutoff, for example, to say, okay, below this score, I may not look at it, so I can focus on the higher ones. Yes. So score is still looked at. Step 1, step 2, and even step 3. If you have taken step 3 and you had very good scores in step 1 and step 2, and step 3 you took easy, it can look bad on your application if you did not do well in that. So step 3, people say just get it out of the way. It's okay to get it out of the way if you've matched in your fellowship, but if you've not matched into fellowship yet and you want to take it sooner, then I would say do you need to put effort in it, because that score also shows up. Yes, but scores could be one of the factors where we put limits on.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alam. So very important question here. So mostly applicants think that, okay, should we add like 4 letters of recommendation from a cardiologist, or 1 should be program director and 3 cardiologist letters, or 2 cardiologist letter, 1 hospitalist letter, and 1 program director letter? What's your thoughts on that?
So your letters, you should definitely have letters from the most well-known and person from the programs you worked in. Let's say people who are well-known outside of your program to other programs for your, and then people who you know are going to write a strong letter for you. If a hospitalist will write a strong letter, then let's say a cardiologist that you worked with, I would go with the letter that the hospitalist is going to write. Because when we are looking for interview, I'm not looking for someone who's already trained in cardiology. I'm looking for someone who is in internal medicine training, who is still in the process of training. And if a hospitalist or department chair says he's one of our outstanding residents, versus a cardiologist saying, yeah, he came on the rotation, he did very well, and this and that, I would go with the program, the chief's letter, because that will make a bigger impact. So if you happen to work with people in your program who are well known nationally or regionally, and they are willing to write you a strong letter, I will go for them. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. Let's suppose someone is not very well known, but hospitalists, we're going to write a really strong letter for you. So you get a 2 hospitalist letter, 1 cardiologist letter, and 1 like letter from your program director. Because mostly like as an IMG, most of the IMGs are in like community programs, and sometimes attendings don't do a lot of research. They don't go to national meetings. So not like too much of academic or scholarly activities. What's your thoughts on that?
And that's okay. When you are, let's say if you're in a community program and you're going to need 4 letters, you want to get 1 letter from your program director, because that would be usually a standardized letter. And in that letter, program director summarizes your past 2 or 3 years you've been there as a resident. And they include your evaluations, a lot of things. It's a pretty standard letter, but it includes a lot of information about your evaluation by other attendings. So program director letter always is important. And then from the rest of it, if you really enjoyed your cardiology rotation and the cardiologist there is not someone who publishes, it's okay, because he's going to have to comment on your clinical acumen, on your personality, how good a team member you are. So that's what matters. It's not a problem.
Thank you so much. Amr, we can move to the next slide.
Sure.
So what are the good questions we should ask during interview from our faculty? So I think good questions I used to ask, like, how's the volume of your program? Because I want to go into like interventional cardiology, so volume is very important for me. I think other things, even if you're non-invasive, I think volume is very important. You're going to see like huge diversity, different pathology. Dr. Allen, what do you think, like what will be like a good questions to ask from our associate PD or PD?
So from the PD, I think honestly, you want to, if you really like that program, you generally want to ask things that will matter to you. For example, if you are in a training program, when you graduate from the training program, you should be able to independently practice from day one. Means you have seen enough patients of different pathologies like heart failure, MI, stroke, cardiovascular disease of various what do you call breadth, that you should have those conditions on your fingertips. So yes, volume is important. Other thing you want to ask is how what's the level of involvement in terms of a fellow into doing procedures, in patient decision making. Like, are you as a fellow, are you running the show with the supervision from the attending, or are you part of the team and it's more authoritarian? So how much independence you have in terms of making decisions, helping the patient. From procedure standpoint, you want to know like um, the volume and for example, when you're on call and there is a patient with cardiac tamponade, who gets to be the first operator on that? Is it the interventional fellow? Is it the general fellow? And especially if you have interest in interventional cardiology. So all of those things, ask them, and then also ask about academic opportunities towards research, towards participation in national meetings, in participation in national societies at various levels, and what does the program do about promoting the fellows. If you are interviewing at a university program, if you're interviewing at a community program, then there you want to ask relevant questions about, mostly about going to be hands-on clinical experience, volume of patients, where the patients come from, is there a VA involved, is there community hospital, or is more private hospital, and if it's a private hospital, how much hands-on do you get to do? So
Thank you so much. I think like Dr. Allen mentioned, transfer ins and transfer outs is very important question for any program, even if it's community or university program. Because when I interviewed like at a big hospitals, I asked them like, what's the transfer out? And they said literally none, no transfer outs. And I got really amazed. I was like, this is the program. So I think it's very important, because if you have transfer outs, you will unlikely be following that patient, and you will gonna eventually not gonna learn much from that. So all right, we're gonna move to the next question here. So what is the best strategy to show interest in the program during fellowship night? Dr. Alam, do you think thank you emails to everybody? Like I had a panel interviews like 4 different panels, 12 people or 15 people interviewed me. I sent thank you emails to all of them, but maybe after 3 days, but it took me a while being on floors. What's your thoughts on thank you emails and letter of interest?
Yes. So after you've interviewed at a program, it's a good idea to send a thank you email. And in that email, try to, so when you're interviewing with someone, for example, you interviewed with me and there was something that we discussed that was kind of like the sticking point of that interview. For example, we talked about, let's say, left main, or we talked about even, for example, the best restaurant around where you want to go eat, and anything that you thought was important in that, just make a note of that. So when you write an email, try to make a personalized email and bring it up one way or the other. So the person who is reading it, the email will say, yeah, it's not a copy paste.
Mr. Murphy is calling. I just want to let
One second, I'm on the meeting. I'll call him later. Huh?
Yeah.
No. So that person who's reading that email will know that this he made an effort, and that will be remembered more than a generic email. We change the title on the top and send to everyone. And at the end of the day, in one program, if you are going to write email to 5 people, remember all 5 people will be talking after the meeting, after before the match, before the rank order list. And if everyone talks about you, your message to them should be consistent. You cannot be saying to me that you want to do interventional cardiology, to the heart failure guy that I want to do heart failure. Then when they talk like, oh, he was a good person who was going to pursue heart failure, like, no, he was going to do interventional. So consistent message, and make sure you bring up something in there that would be remembered, or that you thought from the interview was a take home point. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a very good point. So we'll move to next slide. So how to ace the 15-minute interview on Zoom and in person? I mean, be truthful. I'll say, like, be to the point and concise. Make sure you're professional still, even if it's Zoom. Don't just be in your PJs or a random dress shirt. Still be very professional. I mean, your surroundings does matter on a Zoom interview. I mean, your background or back surroundings, or and how you actually present yourself, eye-to-eye contact during Zoom meetings also. That's the key. I will say, don't just randomly turn off your video. They might kind of think that, oh, you're doing something else on the main time. If it's a break, that's fine. But if you're in a group session, because programs, what they do is, like, you're gonna have 15-minute interview, then you're gonna go to the main room where all the applicants will be there, coordinator will be there, and then you're gonna have another session and another session. Typically, mostly programs I've came across to like a 3 interviews. What's your thoughts on how to ace 15-minute interview?
So one thing is how you present, as you said, right? The background matters. For example, the way I'm sitting is very bland. Where Yasser is sitting, his light is not in the right position, so it's blurring his face. Amir is a good setup. He has some of his achievements on the back, a little bit of books on the side. Looks like he's sitting at an office, right? So you want to make sure that you actually give this impression that you made an effort at your appearance. And then you're going to dress just like you would have dressed if you went in-person interview. It's important. And then be on time. Do not be late. Try not to schedule 2 interviews one day and go back and forth between those. It creates a problem with the programs. And then a bright smile. No matter what's going on, you need to be lively that day. Don't be stressed out that it's an interview. Try to take it as like you're just meeting with someone, and you're trying to um, present yourself. If you try to overdo to impress someone, then it looks also like you're trying harder than usual. That's not good either. So just be yourself and enjoy the talk and answer the questions, ask questions that you have. One key important thing is the location of the camera. Right now, for example, I have 2 screens here. So I'm seeing you all on the big screen, which is to the right of me, and my camera is right in the on the laptop. So you see how I am actually looking to the side. It doesn't look like I'm looking at you in the eyes, right? So the camera should be in front of you, and the level of the camera should be at the level of the eyes. So when you're looking at the screen, You're actually looking at the person. So that's important. Yeah. So that way it looks, it gives a good impression.
Thank you so much. How can we impact our application post-interview for best ranking? So Dr. Alam, do you think like immediately after the interview, my PD from internal medicine will send an email, or my attending in a cardiology who is renowned should send an email right away, or during ranking time? What do you think should, what will be the strategy for residents to kind of like get them ranked high?
So I'll tell you, I mean, it really depends how willing your program director or chief or your mentor from your program is to send those email or make a phone call before or after. Because I remember when we were having interviews, someone would say, oh, yes, so this person from that program called me about this guy also. And he really had good things to say about him. So that matters. So people remember those. If the call is made before the interview, if you know the itinerary, or right after a day or so, because what happens is that most of the program will review the candidates the same day after the application, after the interviews, and then they will have the second meeting when they do the rank order. So it should be right in between the two, so it's not too late that the rank order list is already made, or it's too early that no one has had a chance to discuss. So it should be there within 24, 48 hours after your interview. I think it's a good idea because people still remember you. And if you delay it to the point that we've had 2 or 3 more sessions of interview applicants, then everything becomes a blur. Then people may or may not remember.
Thank you
And
so
it's a good
much. And
idea. If
also,
someone can make that call or send a personalized email, it makes a difference.
thank you so much. And also, do you think like mostly programs use like a numbering method? Like, okay, someone have like X number of publication will get like 10 out, like 6 out of 10. Someone with this much score will gonna get this number, and then they total up the number, and then they rank like, okay, this is my top rank, middle rank, and a lower rank.
Usually, what happens is we assign a score to each application,
Yes.
and that score depends on all these factors. Yeah, like how did the interview go, personality wise, research wise, rapport wise, how about interpersonal skills, everything together. And so we assign a score, and there is no strict criteria that if you have 5 publications versus 10 publications versus 20, then the score is going to change. It really depends on what's your level of involvement in the work and what's the work done, right? So that really is important. And if you have 2 or 3 high impact publications, sometimes that may be all you need. And if you're able to impress someone, what happens is this: if I'm interviewing someone and that person is really outstanding, based on one thing I really like about him, then everything else becomes the same, right? Because I'm going to say, yes, this guy is really good, or this girl is really good. Let's put them here on the top. And then, the other things also come up with it. So it's just about trying to make sure that you really impress the other person by generally your characteristic that you want to highlight, be it your presentations, be it your research, be it your personality, be it your passion about cardiology, or what you like about cardiology. So,
Thank you
and
so much.
again, interview is about reading the other person also, right? It's an
Yes.
active process. It's not just me taking the interview, it's also you taking the interview, because you, as an interviewee, can a lot of the time direct the interview and the discussion in your favor. And that is a skill that you have to practice. Like, if you know that I'm interested in left main interventions, and 2 3 minutes into it you just drop that in there somewhere properly, not like showing like you, but and then the direction may go towards that. Oh yeah, so tell me what you've done about it. And then then from there you have the control of the discussion. And I think it's important to have that. When the interview is going like this, that I keep asking, okay, do you have anything else to ask? Yeah, that means I'm done. And then, but if you do that engagement, the discussion becomes more lively, more active.
Exactly.
Keep it
So
active, keep it proactive. Yeah.
that's very good point. I would like to add here, like, for example, if you have paper on Takusugo, and now attending will gonna definitely ask you during interview that, okay, tell me more about Takusugo. Now you don't know the mu diagnostic criteria even. That is a very bad, I'll say. If you don't know the topics really well, don't bring it.
Right.
If you know in and out of the topic, feel free to bring it. It will going to have a positive impact during your interview. So, all right, I think at this point we could start Q&A session. It's being pretty late for Dr. Anand and for me. So what should we, okay, one more important topic we have to discuss. Sometimes J1 applicants, H1 applicants actually, they have like 45 programs or something. And should they apply to the J1 programs? Yes or no? And if they do, will the program rank them or no?
So
even if their website states that they only offer H1, but sometimes they get the interview as a J1 applicant.
So I'll tell you this personal experience. I was on H1 when I came, and when I was applying for fellowship at that time, University of Connecticut, UConn is on J1. They don't do H1.
Yeah.
So they emailed me. They said, we can interview you, but you have to be willing to switch from H1 to J1. And then it really depends on how important H1 is to you, for that matter, that you're willing to switch. If you are willing to switch, yes, I think that's fine. Then interview there, and it's an easy process to switch from H1 to J1. But a lot of people who get H1 is for a reason, and if the reason is the intention to avoid doing the waiver, for example, or trying to get into immigration, then you probably don't want to switch. And then there's no point going to that program and interview, because you're going to be spent right now is on Zoom. But if you were to travel and do all of that effort, I think it's probably not going to be high yield in that case.
Thank you so much. And should the program director call the program director, or call the coordinator and left a message, or call the associate PD? What should be the recommendation way?
So program director should talk to the program director. I think the communication should be at the level of the PDs. That is matter. Coordinators may take the message and get it to the PD, but it's not the same impact. And sometimes it's hard to get hold of people, but if they can't do that, then I think that's better. If the program director is going to write an email to the program director, that's also very impactful, because finding people on phone sometimes is not that easy. But it has to be communication at that level. The PD should write to PD, chief should write to chief or to PD. That makes a bigger impact.
Thank you so much. Let's move to the next slide, Amit.
Yeah, I think this is the last slide. I can read the questions, and
yes,
then
we can
in the interest of time. So
we can spend like roughly 10 minutes on the Q&As.
Yeah, sure.
Is it fine, Doctor?
Yeah, no problem. I have all the time. I'm waiting
Sure.
for Tammy.
Thank you. The first question we have is from Ritika, and the question is, what's the best way to get involved in research projects and learn how to do systemic reviews and meta-analysis?
Yes, I think you should answer that.
So work with somebody. Feel free to work with me, we have a couple of other members in this group who are very pro in meta-analysis, and my colleagues also. I'll say work with some senior people who have done enough meta-analysis and who can bring in a couple of attendings onto the projects. That will be more impact for you. And basically you learn from each other, right? So once you invite any attending, I have not came across any attending who have refused to not participate in the project. Let me tell you guys, one day I sent an email to head of Amory, like EP, and who was a big name in EP, and he agreed to participate on the project. So I haven't seen like anybody not willing to participate in any scholarly activities with the juniors. So I think that's how you learn, and it's a step-by-step process.
So I think becoming a part of a team is important, especially these days. The time is short, and it's just things move so fast. If you become involved with a team that is very productive and genuinely interested in helping you, then I think you can get into the track much faster. And as Yasser said, it does not hurt, especially if you are in a program that is community program and you do not have someone who is either interested or committed to helping you out with research, then you will have to reach out to other people. And in those cases, you have to be very strategic to ask those people who are going to be willing to review your papers willing to help give you suggestions so that you can make it better. And then there'll be co-authors with you, and that's how you make new acquaintances also.
Yes. And make sure you have some mentor. I was fortunate to like find a mentor during my first year fellowship, and my mentor was always there whenever I needed him. So I think having a mentor from your program or out of program is very, very important. Your application or throughout your career guidance.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Alam and Dr. Star, on that questions. The next question is from Dr. Ramsha, and the question is really about the personal statement. Like the question is how much we should write about ourselves versus our interest in cardiology. So
I think it's a balance you have to strike.
okay.
When I'm reading your personal statement, I already know that you are interested in cardiology. But what I want to know is your level of commitment and the reason you're interested in cardiology, for example. And that has to be a genuine paragraph. And describing yourself, like your background, it does not hurt. It actually helps sometimes. Knowing someone who has gone through a lot of efforts to get to where they are, it always makes a difference, and it gets can you get more respect on that. And Yasser, you can also chime in.
Um, no, I totally agree with you. I think you have explained, and also I explained also in the middle of this video that mention like what drives you to the cardiology, why you want to be cardiologist, what fascinates about you this field, how you can help the patients, what skills you got, what you have learned during your residency to gain those skills, and how you can be a best fit in the system. Remember, it's not just being a cardiologist, or later on throughout your career, where you see yourself, whether you want to be a great academic physician, someone who is doing like a research side by side and doing like a clinical side by side, what you will add on to this field. I think this is very important. If you see cardiology with any other field, we are the only field that is innovative. We innovate every day. Like you're gonna have like a latest advancements in cardiology. Like we get like mostly systems have started using like a 4D echoes, like back in old times, like 2D, 3D, 4D echoes. There's so much like innovation going on every day. So I think that's what I talk during my interviews. Like this is the field that fascinates me because of innovation. Like, and that is true, I think.
Yeah.
Even if the innovation is a polypill, guys. For example, now the trend is like changing from aspirin and metformin separate pill to a polypill. So even discussing that during your interview will be interesting thing to talk about. And like heart failure readmissions, which is a big issue throughout the healthcare system. So think how you can add on to the field. Okay, even if it's interpersonal and communication skills. The way, like for example, I've done 3 years of psychiatry externships before my residency. But so I added that in my during my interviews and in my PS also, because that helped me to improve my interpersonal and communication skills. And when I guide my patients, it actually helped them to be more compliant with the medications. So it can be anything, guys.
Right. So the next question is on the scores. It's from Dr. Ramshed. And the question is, what are the average scores for matched cardio applicants and average step 3 score, or like the competitive score for step 3?
So average scores for step 2 and step 1, I think it's gonna be program dependent, honestly. But I can tell you in the past year, in step 3, I've seen people who were interviewed, average scores were 250, 245, 230, and some candidates had lower score but excellent profiles, and they we interviewed. So we review every application, all of, and then individually select candidates. But on average, I can tell you at Baylor, I think even for medicine, the score is like 250, and step 3 score does not matter that much. But it should not be low. Like, it should not be like a 210 or something. It should be 220, 230 is minimum. That really helps your application, because if step 1 is 250 and 250 step 2, and then you show 220 in step 3, then it will be like, why did you not get good score in step 3? But if you don't have step 3 score, then I'm not going to say, where is your step 3 score? So that's the importance of step 3 also.
Thank you so much. I would like to ask a very important question here before I forget. So when the applicant go unmatched, and next time now the applicants are, should they take like an imaging fellowship, non-ACTM? Should they do a hospitalist job for a couple of years and get their green card and apply again? What do you recommend will be the best strategy for next year to be competitive?
So if you have the, so you need to look at your application and maybe sit with someone and review it and see what was the potentially weakness in your application. And let's say if the application weakness was that you did not have good scores, or the scores were not very high, for example, then you have to add something for the next year to increase your chances. And that would be, if the doing a non-accredited fellowship, it's okay to do it if for a year, and that will add your for the next year you'll have better chances. Other things you could do is, let's say if it was lack of publication and research, then you need to work on that. And if you're someone who can work as a hospitalist at the same time do publications on the side, I think that's okay. Then you strengthen your application. Most of the candidates I've seen, they either go into non-accredited fellowships for a year, because 1 year, MPH is 2-year commitment, and that becomes hard to do sometimes. But that's another route people take. They enroll in MPH or one of those degrees.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Alam. The next question is also on, does it matter which type of publication we have, like case reports versus manuscript?
I'll say like case reports, anything which you can publish, something is better than nothing, to be true. So, but having like a more like meta-analysis, original studies, I think they got more impact. What's your thoughts on this, Dr. Alam?
Yeah, so if it becomes to choosing, let's say 2 candidates have very good profile and one person has done original research or some published papers, the other person has written case reports, then I think the first person gets the preference. Case reports is a starting step. If you can write a few case reports, that helps in the beginning to get you started. But then you should try to write some more in terms of original studies, in terms of review article or something that you can do. Meta-analysis, for example, all of those help on top of the case report. If I have 2 candidates with similar profile, the one who has published papers versus who has done published case reports, I think the first person gets preference usually.
All right. Well, the next question is also the, I think, question of everyone. So how is the interview season is going this year? Is it in person or Zoom? Most of the interview thing.
We are still on Zoom this year.
Okay.
Most of the program will remain Zoom, I think, this year. And if in-person interviews do start, I think that will be a welcome thing, but I don't see that happening so far.
Okay. Next, we have, can you share some question we should not be asking? Okay, we are sharing it. The other question is how that impacts the application if someone is coming from community versus university program?
It does, I mean, community versus university program will make a difference in highly academic research-oriented programs. They may be more inclined towards someone who is at a university program. But if it is a strong clinical program, most of the time they will look at all the candidates. They look at your letters, how strong a clinical person you are. So it may not make that much of a difference in those programs. So
yeah, what's going on?
High
was not to understand about this.
Sure.
Was not to understand about this. Oh, why? What happened? You Anjani, Pakistan? Jindabad.
Sorry, I had to mute the participant. Just a sec.
No.
All right. Okay, I think he muted it off, so it's okay. We can continue. All right. The next question is from M. Newell. The question is, LOR taking a lot of time to be processed. Should you wait until they are uploaded before submitting an application? So I think without LORs, so we must.
I'll take that one. So guys, you can submit 3 LORs, like 1 PD and 2 other LORs, and submit the 4th one later on. If you have 1 in process, what do you think, Dr. Alam? Should the applicants apply a little bit late, maybe like a week late, or?
If let's say of the 4 letters, 3 are already in, the 4th one is being processed, I would apply on day 1. If none of the letters uploaded, so I think you should still try to apply as soon as possible, but without any letters, I think it will be an issue. That being said, the programs will start downloading applications on day 1, but I don't think anyone will even touch them for a week or 2. So 1 week is not a big issue. If you don't have any letters loaded, even if you have 2 letters and the important letters are already there, I would say go ahead and apply, because if your application is selected, then the letters will be updated by the time the application is taken up or printed, for example, if needed.
Thank you so much.
Next question we have, Yasser, like if the publication is not there, but it's just like a abstract that's accepted at the something like the chest, and they don't have an ID, where do they mention it? Like
so you're going to mention as a peer-reviewed online publication / abstract. There's a section, and make sure you put S as a SAM, supplemental issue number, and supplemental page number, like I showed you earlier in the video.
Mm-hmm. And if it's not like published, but it's just accepted, then it will come into the other category where
yes, you can add it in the other category as accepted status.
Mm-hmm. All right. Next question I think is very interesting. Is how important? His question is from Suman, and the question is how important is IT exam for fellowship? So
I'll take that one. So I spoke to a lot of program directors on this. ITE is just for the assessment of your training during your program. It can help program director to write a good letter of recommendation for you, but it's usually not reported to the programs. Dr. Alam can correct me if I'm wrong on that.
We don't see the ITE results.
You don't see that, right?
All right.
Okay, so it doesn't matter if your program director don't even care about the in-training exam and just give like a good LOR to everybody, then it doesn't matter to you. But if he categorized the applicants based on the in-training exam, then it does matter.
Okay. All right. We already 15 minutes up, but we can give 5 more minutes. I will try to be quick. The question next is from Ratika. And does the non-ACGME get converted to ACGME accredited after completion of cardiology fellowship?
Yes, actually, I look into that. It used to be, for example, if you did a year of MRI or a year of heart failure before, that would be converted into your heart failure accreditation. Now, most of the programs, they don't offer you heart failure beforehand. So you cannot do heart failure non-accredited anymore. MRI is doable. I think that does convert into your experience and it is fine. And you will be able to claim that as your imaging experience afterwards. As far as, so I think that those are the 2 big ones. It's usually imaging and heart failure. And some people do, these days the trend is doing cardiovascular critical care. And that's a separate fellowship also now, or it's coming up fellowship. So if you get a chance to do that, that also is gonna look good on your profile.
Okay, thank you.
I think we can stop here.
Yeah,
it's getting late for Dr. Alam also. We appreciate Dr. Alam.
No, I'm very happy, and thank you for inviting me. And if there are other questions, if Yasser or Amir, you send it to me. I'm happy to answer them. Email.
Yes. Thank you so much, guys. If anybody have question, I'll give you my WhatsApp number, my personal email. Feel free to send us, and we'll be happy to answer you.
Good luck, everyone. Hope to
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.